having this conversation with you about AI. I'm a criminologist and criminal psychologist and therapeutic jurisprudence specialist. I got my entree, as they would say, into AI from being a criminologist. So I spent many years, maybe about 2 decades, working in crime prevention, everything from gun and gang violence to child protection to online challenges, and just really having a very diverse and intersectional experience in the realm of crime and criminality, and in particular justice. I've worked with police agencies internationally at the highest level, helping them strategize, helping them build their tactical strategies, and helping them understand the importance of due process and the importance of bringing a heightened level of due diligence to the work that we do. So today we are going to look at reimagining law enforcement in the age of AI. Because this is a police and technology conference, I think I would start basically with artificial intelligence. So everyone is speaking about AI. What is AI? What would I tell you about AI? If you have a phone, if you have any kind of smartphone, if you're using any kind of computer, if you're watching Netflix, if you're shopping at Amazon, if you're doing anything with Google, you have been using AI for a very long time. So what is AI doing? At the moment, AI is doing some absolutely marvelous things. We're seeing AI advancing just about every sector, every discipline, every industry. We're seeing AI optimizing the human experience. What does that mean? It's making the things that we do easier. So now if you want a recommendation for the best restaurant wherever you are, like I did in the hotel of the Radisson, I Googled and said, what are the best restaurants near me? And immediately the restaurants came up, and when I was walking with Ashanti, I was able to see all of the restaurants that I Googled right there. Did not even know the one was actually in the hotel, because I was thinking I had to walk to it. So it's making the things that we do better. It's getting our doctors better. It's getting our information technology systems better. It's getting our traffic systems better. It's getting our healthcare better. But as it's doing some good things, it's also doing some very strange things. So while it's optimizing the human experience and solving some of the world's greatest challenges, when we think about justice, we think about climate justice, we think about the environment, we think about just many of the challenges that we have been unable to solve. And we're not only talking about the US, we're talking about globally. We're seeing some miraculous things with AI in Africa, in India, in Australia, indigenous people using data and using technology. But AI is also creating some real-time ethical challenges. Challenges that we are still yet to understand. Challenges that continue to baffle the individuals who are actually designing this technology. So those brilliant computer scientists, those brilliant data scientists, criminologists, criminal psychologists, economists, the intersectional group that continues to build many of these systems and models and programs and processes, many of them confused at times by what the technology is doing. Some of the biases, the discriminatory source of results, what they call hallucinations in the world of generative AI, which is just another advancement on the ways in which we are thinking about AI. So AI, most people ask me, how do you define AI? And what I always say is AI is still undefined. We are still trying to define exactly what this technology is. Even some of the greatest scholars in this space are yet to come up with a very concrete decision. But what we do know, it's your computers doing very human-like things. And now with computer vision, voice recognition, many times we're having a conversation, and after that conversation on Facebook and then on Instagram and then on LinkedIn, we are seeing things linked to that conversation. And most people are asking themselves, what's going on? You know, how does my computer know this? Or how does my phone know it? And this is happening because of the data that we're using, because of the fact that many of these systems are intertwined and because of something called an algorithm, which I will deal with next. The other thing we know about AI is that it is not a computer system. It is not a technical system. It is a socio-technical system because it is having extraordinary impact on our social systems, the things that keep us together, our socioeconomic situations, everything that deals with the ways in which we interact, engage, and build society. So we are seeing that this technology has a long-term impact, that if we don't do it responsibly, and if we don't do it in a way that is trustworthy, and a way that is safe and secure, we are setting ourselves up as a society for some extraordinary challenges that we may not be able to solve. The other thing that I have realized working in AI, working in criminology, working in policing, working with law enforcement internationally, and just working with this technology, everything from healthcare to criminal justice, to housing, to just internet shopping even, or to just education. We're realizing that this technology has the potential to create extraordinary legacies, but it also has the potential to destroy legacies and to deny legacies because of the impact of data. So AI is not new. It may sound new. It has received an extraordinary amount of power from data, approaches such as data science and machine learning, and of course advanced computer science and advanced statistics, because those are the disciplines that combine to create this technology. But in 1956, some scholars got together, not a very diverse and inclusive group of scholars, of course, all white men, Dartmouth University, an AI summer project, and AI as a field was born. AI has got its superpower now, its firepower, as I said, from the amount of data that we continue to produce, of course, approaches like data science, and the extraordinary amount of compute power that we now build. So this is the framework that I use. And I tell anyone thinking about AI and thinking about using this technology, you have got to think about all of these things. You've got to think that this technology is revolutionary. It is absolutely revolutionary. I mean, the printing press was probably our first revolutionary technology because we were able to print things and share knowledge and share ideas and share concepts and build democracies and just build the world. AI is even more powerful than that. An extraordinary amount of rewards from this technology, but an extraordinary amount of risks. Where there are risks, it means that there are rights that need to be protected. We have rights. We have data rights. We have digital rights. We have algorithmic rights. Rights that you've not even heard of. Rights that are now correlated with civil rights and human rights. Where there are rights, there's a question of representation. So what we can continue to see in our data sets would be the lack of representation, creating many of those risks. Regulation is a major challenge at this moment. So we have a lot of people using this technology, but we have a regulatory space that is yet to be robust. So when I go back to Virginia on Sunday, which is tomorrow, on Monday I'm heading to the White House because we have these continuous conversations on how do we make this technology more safe, more secure, more robust, how do we erect those guardrails. So when you hear people using AI, or agencies or departments saying they're using AI, you've got to ask, what are the regulations? What's the compliance structure? How is it being governed? What is the kind of redress for individuals who have been abused by this technology? The other thing about AI is that we want to ensure that we are continuously building a resilient and resourceful society. This technology has the ability to really eat resources. It's not cheap on the environment to build this technology, to create those data centers, and to continuously process this kind of extraordinary compute power that we want when we ask AI or we ask an algorithm or ask Google for a particular recommendation. And because of how radical this technology is, you've got to think of those long-term impacts on society. So an algorithm. What is an algorithm? I like to say an algorithm is the lifeblood of AI. is what gives AI its energy. And an algorithm is simply a mathematical formula, statistics, combined with computer science, that comes up with an instruction for the computer to perform a specific task. So if you were to ask the computer, again, for a recommendation, what are the top restaurants in Kalamazoo? What are the best barbers in Kalamazoo? Where do I get to buy the best books in Kalamazoo? All of this is giving you the information, but for it to give you the information, how it computes that is with a formula. And that formula is built on data, and more data, and more data. The challenge with algorithms now is that algorithms have the ability to make decisions about things and about us without our input. So this algorithm that is so powerful also has the ability to undermine your own rights, your agency, your autonomy. And we're seeing this now in an area and a space called democracy, in particular at the moment where we are in an election. So if you've been following any of the news, you are constantly hearing about AI and disinformation and deep fakes, because the thing about this technology, AI is an agent and is able to do these great things. So we're able to use it to book flights, to connect with family, to study, to get the kinds of sort of concierge services that we want. We're using something like ChatGPT to get that one-on-one experience. But while this algorithm is doing the things that we want, it's also doing things that we may not want. It's also making decisions about us and for us that we did not authorize. Because what this algorithm is doing, every time we use any form of technology that's attached to us, we are building a data profile. And that algorithm is eating all that data and somehow believing that the decisions that it continues to come up with are the decisions that we want. So you may be reading something on the internet that you can search for, but your search and my search are going to be two different searches because of the kinds of searches we have had in the past. So an algorithm is very powerful and one of the most powerful things at the moment. So these are some terms that I want you to think about. Algorithmic decision-making, automated decision-making, data-driven decision-making. And an algorithm has the ability to automate decision-making. That is what it does. So when a bank designs an algorithm, and a housing company designs an algorithm, and a nonprofit designs an algorithm, they are designing that algorithm to do something very specific. Who should I give loans to? Who should I not give loans to? In the criminal justice, who should I sentence? Who should I not sentence? How long should I give this particular data profile a sentence? Should I give this person bail? Should I not give this person bail? Algorithms are making those decisions. Who gets good credit? Who has good credit and gets a credit card? Who doesn't? Who gets a house? So algorithms are making these decisions. Also making decisions now about who may get a kidney, who may get a heart transplant, who may get life, who may be denied life. So these are very important decisions that algorithms are making, because what we're thinking about now is service delivery, efficiency, effectiveness, and expediency, because we want to ensure that we are making real-time decisions. But are we making those decisions with the right information based on the data that we have? The challenge with the algorithms is that many of these algorithms are being built with historic data sets. And historic data sets carry with them a memory that is deeper than the computation, a memory that is so deep that at the moment we continue to struggle with how do we de-bias these algorithms. So that's sort of setting it up for you. So in policing, these are some of the areas that I work. Predictive analytics, because AI is about data and there is no AI without data. And I have worked in every form of police decision-making, from the early 90s when we were doing problem-oriented, then we were doing hotspot, then we started to do data-driven, then we started to do evidence-based, then we went to predictive policing, then we went to intelligence policing, and now we are at precision policing. So So this is how we are using data and algorithms in policing, and we're doing it in some solid ways, and we're doing it in some ways that are not very sophisticated and definitely need that robust guidance and governance structure. The other aspect of AI that I spend a lot of time when it comes to law enforcement and criminology will be forecasting. The things about algorithms, we're able to feed it a particular amount of data, and then it's able to forecast. So when we think about data, data can do four really good things: hindsight, oversight, insight, and foresight. Those are the four things that we want from any data set. So crime forecasting, crime mapping, robotics, which is an extraordinary aspect of crime prevention, and of course, crime control, drones, and of course the very controversial surveillance technology. Also, when we think about crime solving, data and algorithms have been used quite some time. The Innocence Project, when we think about data and exonerations, when we think about crime scene reconstruction, which is absolutely a brilliant use for this technology, the ability to reconstruct a crime scene and really give you the kinds of cues and clues that you're looking for to solve those crimes. Fraud detection is also a great space when we think about financial crimes, when we think about criminal networks, when we think about corruption. We've seen algorithms doing extraordinary work there as well. Human trafficking, crimes against children, online safety. But the thing about this technology, in as much as it's powerful to get all of this done, it's also vulnerable because it can be hacked. So in as much as we can use it to protect children online, AI, and of course approaches such as ChatGPT, have created new challenges when it comes to online safety, new challenges when it comes to crimes against children. So it's almost like a cat and mouse game. It's really good, it's also challenging big loopholes. So when we're thinking about the courts, we've seen, of course, internationally in China, AI courts, where your magistrate, your judge, your judiciary, everything is actually AI. We know case management is a great space for AI. We know when it comes to algorithmic decision-making, judicial decision-making, risk, recidivism, sentencing, pretrial, detention, bail, parole, anything to do with public safety, all now being driven by AI, algorithms, and of course data. What are the challenges for AI when we think about law enforcement? And there are some very specific challenges. We're dealing with data, we're dealing with historic data sets, and the challenges that we continue to see is that many times our data sets, our historic data sets, continue to advance what we call predetermined objectives. And these predetermined objectives are often systemically flawed. The other question is the oversampling of high-needs communities, because our historic data set, or our police data, often is taken from a particular sample, and we continue to use that sample to build our strategies. So many times we're not getting the kinds of results we deserve because we're not stretching the imagination of the ways in which we are using data in policing. What we also continue to see would be the re-victimization, the re-traumatization, and the re-marginalization of high-needs, underserved communities. And that's something we need to think about, and we're thinking more about as we apply or deploy algorithms in, of course, policing. So the challenge with algorithmic policing, and we know that algorithms can be used for anything to solve crimes now. Algorithms are being used, some police departments are using them like informants, using them like undercover, using them in ways that are also very creative, but ways that could create some challenges. So when we think about AI, we know that data harms. We know that many of these AI systems, because they are built on historic data that carry with it all those decisions that have been made, some good, some not so good, we're seeing that this technology has the ability to automate the status quo, to amplify discrimination, to codify bias, to perpetuate many of these systemic challenges we have seen, like racism, repeat past prejudices, and it could also be deeply destructive. So algorithmic decision making, and that's what it's about now, across the world, in every agency, every discipline, every industry, everyone is trying to get data to make the best decisions. That's what data is about. Data is about decision making. But what we continue to see is that this technology, AI, very powerful, but very vulnerable. It's also deeply flawed. Hence the reason globally we're trying to come up with governance structures to make this technology safer, secure, more responsible, and more trustworthy. We're seeing those embedded historical biases that continue to create what we now call algorithmic bias and algorithmic injustice. So what we are designing at the moment globally would be risk assessment tools, because these tools are supposed to audit these algorithms that we're using, because we continue to see desperate impacts, systemic racism, economic disparities, racial disparities, creating very uneven and unequal or inequalities when we are building the algorithms that we are deploying. AI governance, and it's something that I just want you to think about because you would hear this as a global conversation and one of the biggest conversations at the moment at the White House. So in 2020, the White House created what is considered the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. It is not a law, it is not legally binding, it does provide guidance as to how we need to use this technology. And what this blueprint outlined were 5 approaches. Any algorithm that's being deployed, you as a consumer, you as a producer of knowledge and a producer of data as well, we must have the right to safe and effective systems, which means that these systems should never hurt or harm us. Algorithms must be protected from discrimination. You also have the right to privacy. You need to be notified anytime an algorithm is being used, and you need to know what those implications are, and you need to get an explanation if an algorithm has made a decision about you. Also the ability to opt out and to choose a human alternative when appropriate. So the White House created these guidelines for any American agency, organization, individual, company building any kind of algorithm. They need to think about this blueprint for our rights when it comes to AI. And then last year, in October, the president again deployed this executive order. And this executive order was to ensure that America leads in the AI space, because there's what is considered at the moment an AI arms race between the US and, of course, China. What this executive order hopes to do is to promote more innovation, to ensure that if an algorithm does something to harm you, that you have rights and you can be compensated, there is redress. Another critical question about algorithm and AI is the question of equity, because we continue to see a lack of equity in the ways in which it's being designed, developed, and deployed. Of course, safety, security, privacy, and trust. An algorithm has the ability, AI has the ability to undermine all of these in real time. The executive order also ensures that we come up with strategies to manage the extraordinary amount of risks. And while we're doing all of that, we're still seizing what is called the promise of this extraordinary technology. In March, a federal memo went out from the Office of Management and Budgets. And this federal memo says that every federal agency needs to ventilate the algorithms that they're using. Every agency but the Department of Defense. And I think you would understand why. And what this memo does, it establishes baseline protections for civil rights and safety that federal agencies must meet in their use of AI. It builds on that executive order, and it really speaks to questions of accountability and transparency in the use of AI, and of course it focuses on the public's right to know. We have a right to know every time an algorithm is being used for us or even against us. So this is the duty to warn. And what we've got to realize in the realm of AI and policing or AI and any industry is that we need to be warned about the technology. We need to know what the risks are, we need to know what the limitations are, we need to know what this technology can do. So all the big tech companies now have their scientists, their data scientists, their computer scientists saying, we've got to pull back. We've been building something and really not paying attention to the kind of extraordinary power this technology has. And this duty to warn says that the use of any advanced algorithmic tool in any activities to discover, deter, rehabilitate, or punish people in the breach of a law, it means that you need to know when it's being used, when it's being deployed, where it's being deployed, when, why, how, and how often. That is your right with an algorithm. Duty of care. So what we're also realizing is that anyone who's building an algorithm has a responsibility, what we call a liability responsibility, a duty of care. It's also very critical. And what this says is how tech will be employed and deployed. Companies must tell you what the limitations are, agencies, police agencies as well, the protections and safeguards that are in place, the oversight mechanisms governing the use of this technology, and what ethical frameworks have been used for the training and continuous training. The thing that I want you to think about now is that we have this technology called AI. It's an absolutely brilliant technology. We know that. It's also a very risky technology. It does not come with a manual. You're unable to get that kind of pre-exposure to it. And what we have realized is that this technology is new, it's very dynamic, it's very powerful, but we continue, particularly in the realm of criminology and criminal justice and law enforcement and policing, to use it in ways that are more punitive and ways that continue to penalize communities instead of using it in ways to rehabilitate, reintegrate, re-socialize, and to do more restorative work. So when we think about algorithms, we also think about this black box, because that's what an algorithm is considered. And that black box creates some very significant challenges. So anytime AI is being used, anytime an algorithm has been designed, you as a member of society, you as a member of an oversight board have got to ask certain questions. This data, where did we get it? How did it come to us? What's the provenance of this data? What has this data been used for in the past? What sort of decisions were made with this data? So you have got to interrogate that data. So as I would train police officers to do investigative interviews and to do interrogations, I tell my data science students the same thing: interrogate, interrogate, interrogate that data. Understand that data is never free of human judgment. It's something that's continuously processed. We often hear raw data. That's a fallacy. No data is raw. All data has been cooked, and it has been processed, and it has been microwaved, and it has been boiled, and it has been all of those good things, right? All data not created equally. Different communities historically have experienced data differently. Because it's data, because it's statistics, because it's computer science, because it's numbers, there is this false belief that there's this appearance of neutrality, and data is not neutral in any particular way, so this presumption of objectivity that comes with data, that comes with AI, is only a presumption. Data must be interrogated. This case is from 2016. Some of you may be familiar with it. And this expose was done by ProPublica. And ProPublica decided to take a look at bias in the criminal justice system, looking at machine bias, looking at those risk assessment tools that are used for bail, that are used for sentencing, that are used in pretrial detention. And what ProPublica realized is that what I call a very troublesome inheritance, which is hidden in historic data. So what the algorithm did, the algorithm came up with a risk score for each of these individuals, determining how much of a public risk they were going to be. And if you read the offenses and you look at the children, you will see that the juveniles, their risk score was much higher than the individuals who really had a more violent rap sheet. And what this expose by ProPublica showed us was that because of the data that's being used, sometimes zip codes, sometimes education, sometimes property value, sometimes other socioeconomic characteristics. Sometimes data scientists would code something like whether or not you have a home phone to see whether or not you're going to be a risk or whether or not you're not going to be a risk. And most people don't have a home phone. So when you think about this, what this says to you and what this revealed to us in the AI and the data science space is that many of the algorithms or the risk assessment tools that we were using to build these assessments in the criminal justice system were creating zombie predictions. We're overestimating the risks of Black and brown individuals and creating some very unique challenges. So criminal justice almost became, or if not almost, actually became the testing ground for much of AI because of the high stakes decision, because of the fact that it's real time. Data scientists, computer scientists, statisticians, technologists started to realize, wait a minute, this technology can create some very unique challenges. This is another case which has actually ended in a very positive way because this is Robert Williams from Detroit, and I was told that his lawyer presented yesterday from the ACLU. And this case became almost, if not the poster case, for some of the ills of surveillance technology. So Mr. Williams arrested because the police said, the Detroit police said, that they had images of him shoplifting watches at a mall. When his wife called him of the job and told him the police was at home, he thought it was a prank. He did not believe that he was being arrested because, of course, he knew he did not do anything. Of course, he was arrested in front of his wife and children. Of course, any kind of arrest in front of, any kind of arrest, sometimes even in front of your wife and your children, is a very traumatic experience. He was, of course, detained for many hours, and it changed his life in a very significant way. The good news is that he was awarded not too long ago, maybe a few months ago, I think $200,000, and that has become the first case where anyone has received money for wrongful arrest based on surveillance technology. Whether or not he and his family have been able to overcome the trauma of the arrest and the experience, that is something else up for discussion. So when we think about surveillance technology, we know that surveillance technology has some very powerful uses. And we have seen it in particular when we think about facial recognition in the financial sector. You can unlock your phone with your face, you can do many things with your face. We're seeing in healthcare, facial recognition technology doing brilliant things when it comes to pain management for individuals who may be having a stroke and can connect with their doctor. And we're seeing that really some imaginative things being done with it. In the law enforcement space, we're seeing other types of challenges. So when we talk about surveillance, most people just think, well, it's a camera, the camera is looking at you, the camera is taking a few photographs of you. But these are some of the civil rights and the liberties and the human rights that a technology, if not deployed with those requisite guardrails and the kind of training that is required to use this technology, these are some of the challenges we continue to see. Of course, wrongful arrests and misidentification, and also the fact that a surveillance algorithm, a facial recognition algorithm, has the ability to undermine all of these freedoms: expression, thought, association, movement, assembly, the right to know. Most times we don't know you're being surveilled. Privacy, data protection, and the right to be forgotten, which is also a right that we have if we want to opt out, if we don't want to be a part of. So another case out of Detroit, Portia Woodruff, 8 months pregnant, when she was arrested by the police for carjacking in a gas station where she never was. When they came there, she said, well, look at me, I'm 8 months pregnant. How could I possibly have been jacking a car? Of course, the image that they had of her, the image that they matched using an old driver's license of her did not, reveal that she was the one. It was obviously someone else. This is another case from New Jersey that became a test case as well. When we talk about facial recognition, we talk about false arrest, and we talk about why we have got to be so particular and why we've got to bring a sophisticated level of due diligence to deal with this technology. So the ethical concerns that we continue to see: discrimination, bias, marginalization, oppression, profiling of data, victimization, the weaponizing of our data against us, intergenerational trauma, because we continue in our data sets to transmit that kind of trauma, institutional betrayal, because many of the institutions that are using data are supposed to be using it in our best interest, but creating many challenges, again, coming back to those historical data sets. So when we think about AI, in any realm, you've got to think about accountability, you've got to think about transparency. Two things this gathering is very committed to. And if you're thinking about that, you've got to ask yourself, who's auditing the algorithms? How are they being audited? Are we doing the vulnerability audits? Are we doing the impact testing? At the moment, internationally, in the US as well. We are looking at model testing. The White House and, of course, many of the top tech companies have come together to create a National AI Safety Institute, which is pretty brand new. And what this institute is doing is a lot of field testing, because we're building things in a lab and we're deploying them into the public space and realizing that it's creating an enormous amount of risk, enormous amount of crises. So any agency using any kind of AI must have a risk management strategy, must have a crisis response, must have a contingency plan. And the big thing at the moment is that we're red teaming these technologies, which means we're trying to test them and trick them to see what they can do, what they were not designed to do, to really measure the kind of impact of the technology, the kinds of negative impact. So accountability, transparency, very critical. Due diligence, you cannot use this technology without a very sophisticated understanding. When we think about due diligence, we're also thinking about human oversight, critical to the use of this technology. What is also considered a human in the loop. We're thinking about the kinds of security measures. We're thinking about the accuracy and how rigorous and robust that is. We're thinking about questions around traceability. Can we trace this data back to when it was first used, and can we trace all those challenges that come with the data? Of course, detailed documentation of where this data has come from. There are many technologists, data scientists, computer scientists who are saying, like we have nutrition labels on food, we need to now have data labels on anything that has been designed with data. Any kind of algorithm must have where this data was from, how it was used, and of course, questions around consent that continue to be a very a fragile space, because many times with technology we consent to the use of an application without thoroughly understanding what we're consenting to. And if we're doing this on our phone, many times we just click I agree, I agree, I agree, I agree, until we get to the use of the app, not understanding what we've agreed to. But also studies have been done on the fact that if we were to have actually read all that information, it would have probably taken us about 2 to 3 months before we would get to the use of that app. So the tech companies know what they're doing very significantly and very strategically to get us to do what we need to do. Due process is very critical, but what we realize as well is an algorithm has the ability to undermine due process in real time, because it takes away agency and autonomy, and it undermines things like self-determination as well. So you've got to think about due process. You've got to think about any kind of algorithm. One of the questions I always ask is, when your accuser is an algorithm, what do you do? Now we keep seeing that in the criminal justice space. An algorithm has denied you parole. What do you do? Of course, one of the basic tenets of the criminal justice system is the ability to face your accuser. When that accuser is an algorithm that's contained in a black box, what do you do? Well, we know that an algorithm, when you think about it, and you've got to think about it very strategically, you've got to think about every time an algorithm is being used, what are your rights? Your civil rights, your civil liberties, your human rights. How are those things interacting with the algorithmic rights, the data rights, and the digital rights? AI is about rights, it's about responsibilities. It's about protecting your rights and protecting those responsibilities as we use the technology to do all the great things that it promises as well. So data rights, very, very critical, and I want you to continuously think about how your data rights may be undermined when this technology is being used. So the challenge with AI is that because it's designed by someone, because the algorithm is usually designed by a data scientist, it becomes the intellectual property of the company that has designed it. So once it's intellectual property, there are trade secrets, there are proprietary rights that are usually attached to it. So anytime anyone wants to challenge an algorithm, you would find that the company would say, this is our intellectual property, we have our trades, this is our trade secret, these are our proprietary rights. But what we're realizing is that agencies that are procuring AI, if you work in any kind of agency, procuring any kind of AI technology, you have got to ask certain critical questions about the data, about civil rights, about people's data rights, and about whether or not this AI is ethical, whether or not it's responsible, whether or not it is trustworthy. Data activism is critical. And when I entered the University of Virginia, before I became a professor, I came in there as their first data activist. And it was really to look at ways in which we could use data to enhance communities, to build communities. And what I designed is something called the Digital Force Index that is supposed to be finished in a few months. And what that Digital Force Index allows you to do using your phone is that in any space that you go, you're able to see how much technology, how much surveillance technologies are being deployed against you.
and you're also available to see what your rights are if you can opt out of the things that you need to do. But data activism is bigger than that, and it's really about understanding the power of data and understanding how we could use data to build communities up and to build up our own experiences and to bring that kind of critical thinking that's required to use AI. So we know, as I've said to you, there's no AI without data. We know that generative AI, which is in its most modern form, ChatGPT, which is another technology that people are using, has a data problem. We know that the large language models that we're using to build this technology also has a data problem. So anytime you're having any kind of discussion about data, about an algorithm, about AI, you need to be asking these three questions. About the quality of the data, you need to be asking about data fidelity, and you need to be asking about data integrity. Three critical questions, because those are the major challenges with all these AI systems. Data justice, or algorithmic justice, is also something you need to be thinking about, because this speaks to these tenets here. Fairness. Fairness continues to be a challenge because of historical data sets and because of those systemic biases. Accountability continues to be a challenge because of the opacity or the largeness of the data sets. Transparency and explainability, challenges as well. Accuracy remains a challenge. Auditability, we're still trying to build these systems. We don't have a standard operating procedure that everyone who's using an algorithm or building an algorithm is using. Different agencies are coming up with different things. Questions around accessibility, very critical, because we're seeing that individuals with disabilities having major challenges when it comes to using AI as well. Safety, security, privacy, and this one, trust. Trust is so critical because at the moment, and particularly now as we're going through an election and most people are learning about AI in deceptive ways, how the technology can deceive, how it can spread disinformation, is really undermining what we think about trust. So trust in itself is in a crisis at the moment. And two of the biggest ethical questions about AI is the ethics of trust and the ethics of power and self-interest. Because this is a very powerful technology that many individuals are using to promote their own self-interest and, of course, to collect our data. Questions around data equity, also very powerful, because anything that's being used in the realm of law enforcement and policing should be used in a very equitable way. So equity and fairness combined, so we need to think about that. Anything that you're doing with data, here are some questions that you need to ask always. Who collected? What's the collection process? How was it analyzed? Storage questions, presentation questions, data sharing, data reuse, data disposal. The other topic that's fascinating me at the moment is considered afterlife data and what happens to our data when we pass on. And it's a big question at the moment as companies continue to use our data or continue to use the data of people who are no longer with us, and what are the kinds of ethics around afterlife data. Another area of interest to me right now is our brain data and how we are regulating that, because there are many neuropsychology, many neurological technologies that are now capturing the data of our brain. And many of us don't even understand that is happening, and there needs to be certain ethical structure when it comes to neurological data as well. Data trauma. And data trauma is something that I introduced into the conversation about data, the ways in which historical data sets continue to transmit intergenerational community trauma into our communities. So when you're thinking about data, I also want you to think about the fact that data is something that has been very traumatic for certain communities. There's what we call multi-generational data damages that have not been repaired, that we continue to deploy when we deploy these algorithms, historical data harms, and that question of betrayal that many communities feel when you mention the word data. So data trauma looks at bias, it looks at discrimination, it looks at marginalization, it looks at profiling and victimization. So how do we do, as I end this? We have got to reimagine the ways in which we are using data, the ways we are using data to build algorithms. So while data and AI will have a positive impact in some aspects of policing and some aspects of law enforcement and some aspects of everything, there are ethical challenges that we have got to pay attention to. And if we don't do that, we are creating extraordinary risks that we will not be able to repair because of how fast this technology moves and the speed and pervasiveness of this technology. So what do we need to do? Community-centered innovation and public safety is critical. Community-inspired design, community-inspired research is very critical. How do we achieve transparency and meaningful public participation and community collaboration? Well, we need to do these things for the public. Awareness, which you're doing today, education, which we had a little bit of, engagement, which we will continue to do as we move out of this space and into our own communities. Information is so critical. We've got to bring this information to all communities for them to understand. Questions around the fact that if this technology is being used, there needs to be public disclosure, that right to know, public oversight. Many agencies are not doing that, working with the police, right? Working with law enforcement, coming up with these oversight bodies that are supposed to be asking these critical questions. So this is why our oversight bodies also need to be upskilled in real time, understanding data, understanding the implications. So if we want this technology to truly establish that global legitimacy, we've got to ensure that public confidence and public trust are built into this technology. We've also got to use the technology to empower. I must make a plug always for public interest tech at the University of Virginia. I'm the co-director of our Public Interest Technology Network, and public interest technology is one of the most dynamic and growing spaces in the tech world at the moment. And what this is doing is realizing that we've got to build technology in the public interest, and the public has got to be involved in the building of that technology as well. And we've got to build technology to include, not to exclude, to empower, to liberate, to advance the interest of the public, and police technology falls in the realm of public interest technology. We've got to ensure that this technology is deployed for the greater good of the public benefit. We've got to ensure that we regulate this technology to protect those rights and to ensure those who are using it responsibly. And at the core of public interest technology is that question of justice and due process, which is so critical to understanding the technology. So what do we need at this moment? A radical reimagination in real time, which is a form of rebranding when it comes to the ways we're using AI for police policy, practice, quality of life issues, and of course, public safety. Many individuals will think that technology is a tool that can be used, that can be pressed into service, and that's fine. But we don't ever want to play with these technologies because they are definitely not toys. They are absolutely dangerous, very, very volatile technologies that create an extraordinary amount of vulnerabilities that we cannot push back against. We don't want to continue to build things that track, trace, traumatize, and terrorize community. We want to build things that are more therapeutic, things that are more engaging, and things that are lifting communities up, because we want to reimagine the reimagining and the ways in which we are thinking of using this. Just some basic recommendations for best practices. Ensure that any working group that's being created to deal with any kind of design, development, or deployment of this technology is multidisciplinary, is intersectional, brings diverse, inclusive, and equitable perspectives, is definitely justice-oriented, because what you want to ensure is that you are deploying at all times AI that can be trusted. The technical requirements for procurement and procurement standards and processes must continuously be reviewed and updated, always in real time. Procurement is a critical aspect of AI, responsible AI and trustworthy AI. And you want to create policies and procedures to address any kind of failures you may see if law enforcement does not adhere to the procedures that are the best practice procedures. And of course, we want to encourage anyone using AI to get certified. There are many courses out there for ethical technicians, for ethical data scientists, responsible AI practitioners, for AI auditors, just many courses there. Anyone who's in any kind of oversight body, any kind of agency dealing with this technology must have among them individuals who are really, really schooled in the ethics of this technology and how do we build and deploy responsible AI. Of course, we want to establish mechanisms for redress. It is so critical if people are, unfortunately harmed and abused or by the misuse of this technology. Training, certification, and more training. I cannot overemphasize that. Community education, which is happening here this morning, which is a very positive start for the kinds of engagement we need to have around the capabilities. As I said to you, I am fascinated by this technology. I am committed to this technology. I spend all day thinking about AI and data, and I love this space. But what makes me so proficient in this space is my understanding of those risks and how to mitigate those risks, of course, how to detect, how to manage, and how to take that information and improve the systems that we're using. So it's a great technology, extraordinary capabilities, but limitations and risks. Anything that you're doing with this AI, I ask you as a community to ensure you bring those diverse voices in there, ensure that it's community-driven design, ensure that it's community-driven research. And the thing that we want to do with this technology is no harm. There's no perfect algorithm, there's going to be no perfect data set, there are always going to be challenges, but if you bring that sophisticated understanding, that high level of due diligence, really understanding duty of care, and really understanding how this technology can harm, you can reduce those harms. And as I end, 3 things that I want you to take away. Anything AI must be justice-oriented, trauma-informed, and human-centered. And with that, I thank you very much. I guess we're going to do some questions, if there are any. Sure.
The slide that you showed that said almost heritage and impact of historical data.
I'm sorry?
The slide talking about the hidden effects of
Oh, right.
historical data.
Sure. This one right here.
That, if you were designing an appropriate algorithm, then I can easily see how it would work like that. But then, isn't there a feedback mechanism? I mean, that should have gone and fed back in so that it gets better and better.
Well, that's the challenge with the algorithms that are being designed, in the criminal justice space, and that's when we speak about algorithmic auditing. So many of these algorithms were designed have not been audited, and that's why we're saying that auditing is so critical, because algorithms have the ability to go rogue. And we've seen that. We've seen it with Air Canada. They had an algorithm that was answering questions online and telling anyone who had a bereavement issue and who was traveling for anything to do with grief that they would get 50% off of their ticket. When the case actually came to management and people kept calling and saying, well, what about this bereavement 50% off? And then the company said, the chatbot did that. And the company tried to go to court and say, we didn't do it, the chatbot did it, and you need to charge the chatbot. Of course, that is, Air Canada had to pay. But you're quite correct. This speaks to the need for risk assessments and vulnerability audits, and that AI Bill of Rights and the executive order and the many of the federal memos are saying that any agency using an algorithm need to really audit those algorithms every 6 months to ensure what we're seeing is what we need to see and to ensure we're not doing these kinds of traumatic experiences. So you're quite on point with that.
Yeah, I mean, because when I was thinking about this, and it was a long time ago, the advantage of using any kind of data or any kind of algorithm thing, the advantage of using any kind of data or algorithm was supposed to be to remove the human bias. And that was considered by far a more important risk than that the data would do something wrong.
Most definitely, and the thing is this, with bias, we're all biased. We all have biases, we all carry biases. Some of them work for us, some of them work against us. The challenge with the bias in an algorithm is the speed and the scale. So when an algorithm deploys bias, it's deploying bias in a way that is so pervasive, it's difficult to pull back. With human bias, sometimes in the court, you can have somebody who decides to challenge it. You may have an advocacy group who decides to look at the information again and then present the case again, or you have certain legal structures that you can move through to try to bring more redress. Sometimes when an algorithm makes a decision, because there is this faulty belief, many of us, And we saw a very similar case in Allegheny County in Pennsylvania with algorithms that were being used in the child protection system that was making some brutal decisions, but the social workers who were using the algorithm said, well, you know, the computer was giving us that information. We weren't really trained to critically analyze what the computer was doing. We were trained on a process. Put this in, click that, look at this, and make a decision based on that. They were not analyzing. They were not bringing that critical thinking and that due diligence. And things were happening, and it was just looking like process and procedure. So now we're saying we've got to do these risk assessments, and the National AI Safety Institute that the White House and of course the National Science Foundation and other technical agencies have come together to create are saying that any algorithm that's being designed has got to be field tested before it's deployed. So this is now the space where all of these things are going to be tested before they hit the street. So the Safety and Security Institutes around AI is happening in the US, it's happening in the UK, it's happening across Europe, because we know the EU deployed, put into law the first AI Act. It's the only one in the world, and of course we know that other countries are doing the same thing. We've got to red team these systems, we've got to full test them to ensure that they are doing what they're supposed to do and not doing the things that they're not supposed to do. And that's the challenge. So when you're hearing agencies and companies and organizations who are deploying these algorithms, you've got to ask them, you know, what are the ethical concerns? What are the kinds of ways you are building trust? What's your transparency methodology? You know, how do we ensure this is accountable? You've got to ask those questions because we're still struggling with what governance needs to look like. And just when we thought we were dealing with AI, then we got these large language models like ChatGPT that came and changed the game, and every day something new is happening. So I always say we've got to be ethically vigilant because this is happening so quickly. So you've got to bring that heightened due diligence and that sophistication with you every time you approach an algorithm.
I feel like this might be maybe a simplified way of thinking about this, but is it helpful to, say, cap how far back you use data? Since we know, especially with like law enforcement and healthcare, the disparities within race that have affected those two areas. Would it be helpful at all to say maybe not go use data so far back, or to cap say maybe only using 5 years? Would that even make an effect at this point?
Well, the challenge with historical data is that it has been used in so many other data. It's like salt, right? Think about salt in food. So you can't go back and take out all the salt from the other things, if you're understanding what I'm saying. So the thing with historical data, it's been used to season so many other data sets. So you may take something that's only 5 years ago, but that model, that data set has been built using that other data. So there's no way to distill it out of the data set. That's the challenge. And that's the memory that I speak about. Because we have data scientists, we have computer scientists, we have technologists, we have some of the most brilliant minds working on this technology. But then when you use something like ChatGPT and it produces something that looks factual but is not factual, or when you're using an AI system that's sending you a particular amount of, and that's the challenge with this technology, is that it's an agent. So in as much as AI could do all these great recommendations for us, that algorithm is also doing things that we have not asked it to do. It's also sending us information it thinks we want. It's also doing things it thinks we may want to do, right? But it's doing that based on these data sets, our data combined with other data sets. So it's, put it like this, we now say that data is our DNA. When you think about your DNA, you're thinking about all the DNA from all the ancestors that come together to make us. And there's no one process that we can do to distill the part of our DNA that we don't like, right? And that's the challenge with our data sets. Thank you very much.
So yes, I know I wasn't here yesterday, but my interest is there's someone here who can speak to our local policing processes as to how AI has helped or provided barriers, challenges.
Is that coming up in the next presentation? I think it's here.
Locally,
maybe share the fuller case there?
Sure.
Good morning, Sean.
Talking about helped and what barriers there are, right? So I'll point to this slide right here and say helped. In my mind, of course, until I saw this slide, we have a system that I advocated for that helps individuals inside the organization make sure that when somebody is brought into the jail, that we look at them and put them in the right area, so we're not putting, I'll say, an 18-year-old who's here for shoplifting or something minor in with a 42-year-old pedophile. Or, so that's how I'll say it's helped. Of course, now I have a whole list of questions that I have taken lots of pictures for. Hopefully I get a copy of this.
Most definitely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Because, of course, I have a team of technology experts that we started, 5 years ago. And so the barriers that I'm seeing is law enforcement is 5 years ago getting into this. 1956, AI was coined, So here I'm thinking that we were far in advance of many of these technologies. And now I have lots of concerns, and we're going to start looking for these certificates
to make sure that the two people I do have in the organization, which is something I've had to fight for, are trained in these things, because it's my goal to make sure that everything that we do put forward is done in an ethical way and in a way that's going to help the community as a whole, as opposed to ever becoming a harm. And you heard some of this yesterday from me, where I have serious concerns for AI.
I try to tell myself it's because you're a 60-year-old white man who was raised like this guy, and you don't have all of these other concerns, thoughts, or fears that other people have been raised with, and that are part of their DNA, like you just talked about. And so I now also recognize that our committee that we are forming at the board's request, and I'm one of the chairs, we'll have a citizens chair also, of the information gathering systems of Kalamazoo County. We're starting to study those. And of course, I'm going to look for making sure that some of the expertise that we're reading more and more about is part of that committee. Hopefully I answered your question. Thank you.